Pittsburgh Steelers fans, what's going on? This is Jeff Hartman, editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, with you for another episode of the Steelers preview. Goodness gracious, this could be the last one of the 2019 regular season, but we hope that's not the case because the Pittsburgh Steelers travel to M&T Bank Stadium in Baltimore, Maryland to play the Ravens. We have a lot to talk about in this game, in this matchup, and a lot on the line for Pittsburgh Steelers. But joining me as always, Bryan Anthony Davis. What's going on, Bryan?
Merry Christmas. Happy Boxing Day. I know you're a big Boxing Day fan there, Jeff. Did you take anything back?
I don't even know what Boxing Day is.
Well, Boxing Day was, it's actually a lot bigger in England, but correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, on this. I believe that it's for putting all the stuff that you need to take back to the stores back in a box and taking it back to the store.
Yeah, that's not at all what I thought that was. I have no idea.
I believe that's the origin of it.
Well, there you go. Happy Boxing Day to everyone out there. Dave, how are you doing this evening?
I am recovering from the exhaustion that is December 25th, and this is good. This is good to get back to talking Steelers stuff. I'm ready to roll.
Yeah, actually, I came on yesterday during Christmas and actually had a good little following come on and join me for about 30 minutes. It was good to talk to everybody. And I want to start with the topic that I had yesterday, and that was this news of Ben Roethlisberger. And, I know Brian sent out in the group text that Ben's picture of him in his pajamas and his kids in their pajamas and saying, don't worry, I'll be back. We'll start with you, Brian. When you see this, what's your overall reaction of Ben Roethlisberger and what's going down?
My first thought was, thank goodness he's not homeless, because he looks homeless on the sidelines. But then I realized how much he makes a year, so I'm like, he's okay. That's just a fashion statement. I thought the outfits were the pajamas were really cute. The dogs were even dressed in matching pajamas. I know the Davises had kind of matching pajamas. Going with the red and black plaid, so that's something that my daughter actually insisted on. So I could see it happening. I'm making the same announcement as Ben. I fully intend to come back to BTSC next year. And why wouldn't Ben say that? Because Chris Mortensen came up with something, and we talked about this on The Hangover. Jeff was a guest star on The Hangover the other day with Tony and I, and mentioned that, these guys come up with stuff to stay relevant, and they hear something and they run with it. And hey, if it's wrong, it doesn't hurt them. They keep, ESPN or NFL Network, they keep bringing these guys back. It doesn't matter how many times was Ian Rappaport wrong on the whole Antonio Brown situation and Mr. Third and Fifth situation and everything. These guys are wrong a lot. So Ben needed to come out and say emphatically, look, I'm coming back. Don't listen to that. Let me be the guy who says I'm not coming back or not. There's something to look forward to here.
Dave, what were your thoughts?
That it was nice to see him just say something about it, because, so many times he just lets things like that roll. So, did the Christmas post and actually address the issue. So I like that he said it. That should be the plan. The plan should be that he's coming back, but he is older. You got to see how long is it going to be until he throws the ball. That's what we got to see what happens when he actually starts throwing, to see if that's going to be realistic or not.
Right, and that's the premise of my podcast I did yesterday, which was he can say all he wants until he's able to throw an item, an object, anything, a tennis ball, a golf ball, football, baseball, doesn't matter. No one knows. No one knows. So that was I would say, the biggest news this week for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But we really need to talk about this game against the Ravens for a lot of different reasons. And Dave, why don't you run down the latest injury report about this Week 17 game? Today, this is being recorded on Thursday, so these are not finalized, but this is the Thursday injury report. Go ahead, Dave.
Yes, on the injury report, now a couple things to remember. That, of course, Mason Rudolph isn't on there anymore because he was placed on injured reserve, so don't look for him to be on the injury report. The two players that were designated to return, they are not on the active roster, so they're not on the injury report. That was Ryan Switzer and Roosevelt Nix. So, because a lot of people were asking these questions when the injury report came out. So the players that are on the injury report are Marquise Pouncey, who has already been ruled out by Coach Tomlin for this week. He did that in his Tuesday press conference. James Conner did not practice for the second day in a row. Coach Tomlin did not seem optimistic about him being able to play this week, but he said practice would be the guide 2 days of no practice. We're looking towards, it would really take something big tomorrow for Connor to be able to play in Baltimore. Now, one other player that was new to the injury report today was Joe Hayden with a foot, but it was already reported that he says, it was more precautionary. I'm fine. I'm playing Sunday. It's no big deal. And yesterday there was a new player with Steven Nelson in a groin, but he was a full participant today. So it looks like the only players to really worry about are going to be Pouncey, who's already out, and Connor, who is probably out.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I don't see James Conner playing, and I really don't feel that this is going to impact the Steelers too much. I mean, in between BJ Finney starting at center, who he's done already, so his third start this season, for Marquise Pouncey, and then James Conner, he's missed a lot of time this season, so I don't think it's going to be that big of a loss. Brian, when you look at these injuries, especially at running back, how do you foresee the Steelers dealing with the running back situation? Who gets the majority of carries, or is it running back by committee between Jalen Samuels, Kareth White Jr., and Benny Snell?
I think if Benny Snell comes in, I think it might have to be in the third or fourth quarter. He's really not. He's one that doesn't get it going early. I would much rather see a guy like Kareth White get the majority of the carries right now. Jalen Samuels be in there. I don't want to say for gimmick reasons, but in passing situations, let's put it that way more. Benny Snell right now, he had a couple times where he came in and looked good, but his average was still not that stellar. You're getting more average yards per carry out of Kareth White, and I think it's time to kind of jump on that train with Kareth White. And I see a lot of Willie Parker in him, and it's not just because he came out of nowhere, undrafted free agent coming in. I find it more as a part that he's just fast. He reminds me of Willie in stature a little bit more, and he could break one. And so I'd much rather them give him a chance. If you look back 15 years ago, the final game of the season, Willie Parker took off, and he didn't really have his breakout year until 2005, but there were signs of it. So maybe that could kind of mimic that, and there could be signs of Kareth White going nuts for this team. I don't care if James Conner, I know most likely out. I don't care if he shows up tomorrow and says I'm completely healthy. He's not a part of the game plan. They did that a little too much in the Buffalo game, and Mike Tomlin is very big on guys getting the reps all week in practice.
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. So I think when you look at this upcoming game and you look at the Steelers offense with Devlin Hodges at quarterback, it's going to be tough sledding again, even against the Ravens backups, which it's been reported. Again, just reported. I mean, John Harbaugh said he was going to bench Lamar Jackson and Earl Thomas and Marshall Yanda and a bunch of other guys. But Dave, when you think about Devlin Hodges, who is kind of being forced into starting based on the fact that Rudolph was hurt, where's your optimism level when it comes to Hodges being able to go into Baltimore and winning a game against backups?
I guess we'll see kind of how we feel about that when we get to our game predictions, but I'm not overly optimistic that the offense can do enough to win the game with who they have available. Now, notice James Conner has been back for the last 2 games, and those are both games that the Steelers only scored 10 points in each and did not win the game. So when he was out, they were still getting production, just more as an entire unit. So I'm not as worried with that as much as anything. Duck's just got to let the water roll off his back, and get out there and don't second guess your throws. Don't do the paralysis by analysis. Get out there and just play your game. Jeff, you are muted.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
I finally got to say it.
He's never done that, Dave.
That's because I never mute myself, but I'm sick, and so I don't want to cough in front of the microphone. So I've been muted.
There's chinks and crypto and I can't even say.
Good one, Brian. Way to go. There you go. Way to just take that and run with it. All right.
Yeah, I just killed it. I'm just so shocked. You've never done that.
Can I address the one thing that I did bring up before in case people weren't aware of the situation about the 2 players designated to return from IR?
Sure.
Yes, the Steelers designated today Ryan Switzer and Roosevelt Nix to return from IR, which is the designation they can use at any time on 2 players. But what you have to remember is that this designation is, you can do it where they can return to practice 6 weeks after they were placed on IR, but they have to be 8 games until they can play again. So this was only a practice issue. Neither player would be eligible to be put back on the roster until the second round of the playoffs because of when they were placed on IR. So it was big news for a while, but then people started to realize, wait a second, is this really going to help us this week? And the answer is no.
No, they're not going to. I fell into that trap as well. When the news broke, I was at my computer and I wrote the article as in they could be back this week and who's not going to get a helmet. And then Dave was like, well, don't they have to wait a certain amount of time? I was like, oh, shoot, you're right. So we had to backtrack and edit some stuff. But ultimately, I honestly, I guess, was there anyone else on injured reserve that could have come back other than Switzerland?
Yeah. I actually put an article out there today. If you didn't get a chance, go check it out at behindthesteelcurtain.com. It went over the rules of returning from IR because some people were unclear about it. And I went through every Steeler that was placed on IR this year when they could have returned and what the deal was. Like Ben Roethlisberger when he could have come back, like Stephon Tuitt, like Sean Davis, who was the player that a lot of Steeler fans thought would be coming back later in the season. But the one time it was mentioned in a press conference with Coach Tomlin, he kind of dismissed it, said, I don't know what's going on with players that aren't with us. And that's all that was said. And I was really surprised that it wasn't Davis. They used it both on these players just so they could practice. And that's pretty much it. There was if they weren't bringing back one of the other guys that was put on IR before that, like even Ulysses Gilbert III could have been another one. If they weren't bringing them back, they might as well at least brought back these guys that could at least practice.
Can I say something about that real quick? Mm-hmm. I love most everything that Mike Tomlin does. I'm a fan. I hate when he says I know nothing about anybody that's injured or not with us in the locker room. Look, if you're the CEO of the team, you know what's going on. You know what's going on with these players. He just doesn't want to talk about it, and I think that's the biggest cop out of anything that he does. I hate that he does that. Well, you're telling me he doesn't know how Sean Davis is doing. He's not checking. He's not getting updates. He has to be.
Well, from what I gathered, Sean Davis tore his labrum in his shoulder. And that's a season ender. That would be like if a guy tore his Achilles tendon or tore his ACL. And you're done for the year. And so you might be in the building rehabbing, and Tomlin might see him in the training room. But ultimately, what is there to check on? He can't come back. And so a lot of people were like, oh my gosh, I felt he can come back. Remember, a torn labrum is the same injury that Senquez Golson suffered like the first week of training camp. I think it was his second season, or maybe that was his first. And that's Brian's boy. And so Senquez Golson never played again because that shoulder injury. And that happened early in training camp. So because of that, I don't think there's a reason for him to check on him because he has other stuff to worry about, like his quarterback throwing 6 interceptions in the last 2 games.
Oh, so I completely disagree with that.
Why would you check on Sean Davis if he can't play?
You're the CEO of the team. You know what's going on with him. You might see, you walk past, is he just walking past him in the locker room and completely ignoring him if he sees him, or in the weight room, or sees him at all?
Why does he have to make that information public? Why does he have to keep their relationship?
He doesn't make anything public.
And so neither does any other coach in the NFL.
That's the one thing I complain about him. It's just a cop-out. Then again, I don't know why these guys ask the questions, because he's just going to come up with that answer. You know what? He's probably not ready to play. I'm not sure. But by saying that, kind of sounds like he doesn't give a crap.
Maybe he doesn't give a crap. Maybe he doesn't give a crap. Bill Belichick.
Do I get to settle this one?
Well, no. Do you see Bill Belichick really like waxing poetic about injured players? He's no, nonsense. No,
Dave, I know what you're going to say. You're going to agree with Jeff.
No, I'm not going to. I'm going to kind of just bring this up, and that is, do the coaches really trust the player when they say, Coach, I'm doing great? Who does the coach ultimately hear from? He hears from the medical training staff. And until the medical training staff tells him that there's something to think about with Sean Davis, there's no reason for him to talk about anything that he says with Sean Davis in the locker room.
Okay, Jeff's going to cut me off soon, so let me throw this out here. Look, you're asking the medical staff in meetings. When he says he doesn't concern himself or he doesn't know about it, he's lying. He knows. And that's the only thing I ever complain about with a guy. That's it.
So, I wouldn't be shocked if Sean Davis isn't even in the facility, because if he's not playing, he's done. He's not coming back. I wouldn't be shocked if he's rehabbing somewhere else. Players do that from time to time. Look, here's the thing. So you're telling me that when he sits down and if he has a meeting with his training staff, that he wants to make sure, hey, how is Stephon Tuitt's pectoral injury coming along? He'll do that in the offseason because Stephon Tuitt can't come back. So I'm concerned. If I'm the coach, I'm concerned with the players that could be available to me this week. How bad is Joe Hayden's foot? What about James Conner's quad? Marquise Pouncey's knee, is it significant? If we win, could he play next week? Those are the things I'm concerning myself with. Everything else will take care of itself in the offseason because they're not coming back. I understand your CEO point, Brian. I really
You guys
do.
were coaches.
But no, I know. But the CEO point is that, does the CEO of the company know what's going on at every single level of the business? If it's a big enough corporation, no. They have to trust the people underneath them to do their job.
You know what? If you had a sophomore playing for your team that broke his arm in the first game of the season, and someone says, "Hey Jeff, how's Johnny doing? Is he doing any better?" It's like, I'm only concerned with the guys that are here right now. That's terrible.
Do you want to really know what my answer would be? If Johnny breaks his arm first week of the season and he's done for the year, hey, how's Johnny doing? I guess fine. He still has a broken arm.
Okay.
But what else am I supposed to
honestly,
say?
Another analogy would be like if you're talking about a high school coach that Jeff and I both coached high school in various sports, is if a player is deemed academically ineligible.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's he doing? Well, he's not with us. He's not eligible until someone comes and tells me that he's eligible. I'm still going to check in with a guy and say, hey, you doing your schoolwork? If I see him in the hallway at school, I'm going to say, you doing your work? You trying to get your grades up, everything else? Yeah, I'm trying. But it doesn't mean I don't know anything about whether or not he's coming back until someone in either the vice principal's office or the guidance office tells me, hey, he's eligible to play again.
I concede. You know why I concede? Because you guys are just you're gonna take whatever somebody said you to toe the company line. You're just gonna go with it, whatever he's saying.
I'm just coming at it. No, I'm just coming at it from a standpoint as a coach of what I would do.
It's no human compassion.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people want to know how Sean Davis is doing.
And if you're not required to let anyone know, I mean, Brian, what did I say to you on the way to Pittsburgh to watch the Buffalo game? I said, wouldn't it be the biggest con job in the world if something happened where Ben Roethlisberger was much better than what they ever said, didn't have to have the surgery, and then all of a sudden, without any announcement, boom, he was back at practice, IR designated return. Of course, you wouldn't want Coach Tomlin say anything 3 weeks before that about Ben Roethlisberger. You don't say it. You just don't say it. That's just kind of how it goes.
Well, I get that, but all I'm saying is we've been wondering about Sean Davis for months. No one said he's never coming back. He just says, I don't know, he's not here. So we don't get that information. So
why do you want that? I mean, I don't understand why you want that information.
So we're supposed to invest ourselves in the team as fans, but we're not allowed to have all the information.
No, because we're not.
We're never going to have all the information.
But we're
nowhere close to getting all the information now.
You know what? This is going on way too long. I just think you guys are going to do whatever they want to do. If they want to switch the concessions, it's like, well,
I'm not saying you don't have a
great idea for them to switch from Pepsi to Coke because that's what Art Rooney wanted to do.
It's not that you don't have a point. It would be nice to know that, but I mean, come on. How long has Mike Tomlin been the coach? And are you really expecting anything else? Is it wise to let the other teams know that this is possible? I mean, what's more important, to let the fans know, oh, your player might be coming back or not, or to let the other team know that they might have to plan for something or not?
You guys just said he's not coming back, so why can't they tell us he's not coming? He's probably not coming back.
Well,
and everyone on the line is, who cares, Bud? Who cares?
Well, now
this is something that bothers me.
But the thing is, why tip your hand on who you're thinking about?
You know what? I dare one of you out there. I dare one of you out there to back me.
But guess what?
And I know who's going to back me. I can tell you who's going to back me.
That now there's no reason for him to not answer about Sean Davis because he can't come back because they've used the two designated returns on someone else.
But we don't know that. No one said it. Why can't he just say, hey, he's not coming back? Not an issue.
Because it happened this morning that they brought back the other two guys. He hasn't had a chance to say anything since that time about Sean Davis.
Everything's a secret.
All right. So this is a good time to mention that if you want to help out the program, you can help out the program by just liking the videos. hitting the like button and commenting on the videos and sharing them. But make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything.
I knew it. I knew that's the guy I knew who would have my back right there.
Oh my God. Can we move on?
No.
Seriously.
Nope.
It's a moot point. It doesn't even matter. So, all right. We have a lot to talk about. And I do want to mention that if no one's asked, but maybe they're curious, there is going to be an after party again today after this episode. So make sure you stick around. We'll be back on. It'll be more of what you just experienced, just maybe not so much Steelers talk. So let's talk a little bit about playoff scenarios. The biggest playoff scenario, or I should say the easiest playoff scenario, is the Steelers win in Baltimore and the Titans lose in Houston to the Texans. Now, Dave, you wrote an article. I wanted to get your opinion, and I wanted to kind of have you talk about this a little bit in regards to the scheduling what the NFL put out there and how maybe it's skewed against the Steelers. I thought it was very interesting and fascinating. Go ahead and explain that to the listeners out there.
Okay, well, I'll let you form your own opinion because I wasn't saying that it was or it wasn't. I was just curious what everyone thought. But they put all the games that they say matter all at the same time at 4:25 because you have the Titans-Texans game at 4:25, the Steelers-Ravens, because if the Titans win, it's over, they're in. If they lose, then it's up to the Steelers. If the Steelers win after the Titans lose, they're in, it's over. Then if they both lose, it falls to the Colts. The Colts can't get in. But the thing with the Colts is that they could create a tiebreaker that eliminates the Titans because if there's more than two teams in a tiebreaker, the first thing they do is they take any two teams that are in the same division and have the team that's higher in the division move on and the other one is eliminated. If the Colts win and the Titans lose, the Colts will be ahead of the Titans because of tiebreakers in the division because of their division record. That kicks the Titans out. Then the Steelers have the tiebreaker over the Colts in head-to-head. But then if the Oakland Raiders also win, they would kick out the Colts as well because they beat the Colts. So then it comes to Steelers, Raiders, and it goes all the way down to strength of victory, which is yet to be determined because there's 4 other games that all 4 of them would have to fall in line perfectly for the Steelers to have a greater strength of victory. I know the Dolphins would have to beat the Patriots would be the one that would be the most difficult. Then there was the two other AFC North matchups, and Kansas City would have to have won. Now, coming back to Kansas City, that was the problem with the scheduling, is that if the Kansas City Chiefs defeat the Los Angeles Chargers, I even said Los Angeles, if they defeat them, they are locked into the 3 seed, and the Houston Texans cannot change their seed and would have nothing to play for. Therefore, you would think that they would have that Kansas City game at 4:25, but the NFL dropped the ball and has that game at 1 o'clock. So the Texans could know by kickoff of their game, most likely, if they have anything to play for or not, rather than have to have it play out at the same time. Now, you could say that's putting a disadvantage to the Steelers and even the Raiders, because then the Tennessee could face a depleted Texans team. Or is it just making it more fair since the Steelers are already going to be facing a depleted Baltimore team? That's kind of up to whichever fan base you follow more is probably how your opinion is going to fall there.
Brian, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, my brain hurts. Second of all, I'm not actually on the team, so I really can't. I can't really divulge, and I don't work for the NFL, so I really can't say because I don't know. But finally got the Jeff headshake. Now, you know what? Here's the thing: they do this just so we're not turning off. That's the thing. They're also doing it. It's a ratings ploy. They can't take too many and send too many to 4:25. So that's exactly what they're doing. They need to have some of those 1 p.m. games going, and they don't expect it to go all the way down the line, which it very well could. But at that point, they don't expect a lot of us to know what Dave knows and what Dave just explained to us. They just expect us to know that right now the Titans lose and the Steelers lose. Maybe the Ravens are back, or the Raiders are back in. They expect us to know that Titans win, Steelers lose, over. They expect us to know Steelers lose, Titans win. But I think I'm repeating myself. But what they expect us just to think about those head-to-head games. So they're not thinking that we're not going to tune out. I don't think it has anything to do with the Texans tanking. I think they don't care about that. All they care about is the fact that the Steelers and the the Titans are playing at 4:25, and gives you a reason to keep on watching. Because if they're playing at 1 o'clock, both playing at 1 o'clock, you don't have to tune in at 4:25 because those games don't matter. They need games to matter.
There's going to be plenty of games that matter. Now, let's talk a little bit about this from a matchup perspective. It's such a unique situation with the Ravens not starting a lot of key players, especially on offense. What is the one matchup that you all look at this game and say, if the Steelers have any shot, they need to win this particular matchup? Brian, we'll go with you first.
You can't let Marcus Peters beat you. You can't let Marcus Peters it's Duck Hodges against Marcus Peters at this point. You can't let him pick you off, because if he's going to pick you off, he's picking 6. He's a guy that can do that. So I think that is the key matchup in this game.
What about you, Dave?
Let me see. I really think, that's a pretty good one, Brian. That it really is going to come down as if the Steelers can put up points at all. So we know the defense and what they can do. So I think it's pretty important that they say Brandon Williams is one of the guys that is not going to be playing, who is your big run stuffer up front. So with that being said, perhaps maybe the Steelers can get the running game going a little bit more, which can open up some stuff otherwise.
For me, I think it's all about RG3. This is a guy that we haven't seen much of this year. I think he played in Miami earlier this season when the Ravens went down to Miami and just blew their doors off. I think they need to stop the run. Mark Ingram's not playing, so Gus Edwards, no Marshall Yonda. This is a game where the Steelers' defensive front should dominate, and they should suffocate the run, force RG3 to throw. And if RG3 is still the RG3 that we're used to seeing, meaning back when he was with Washington and with Cleveland, I like the Steelers' chances of getting some turnovers. But like you said, Dave, it comes down to, can the Steelers score points? So, Brian, I'll ask you, who's going to be the player that's going to break out and get the Steelers at least 2 touchdowns in this game?
You're going to hate this, but nobody.
You don't think they can?
No.
Not even against the backups?
I really don't, because really, who's really missing on defense? Earl Thomas and Brandon Williams. But we've seen teams that their defenses aren't even close to what Cincinnati's defense isn't even close to what Baltimore's is, and they really didn't pin a lot of points on Cincinnati. They couldn't get it going, and we're talking about last week when they came in against the Jets, and the Jets are a better defense, but the Jets still aren't as good as Baltimore. And Mason Rudolph had maybe 2 decent series in that whole game, and the first 3 series when he was in the second half, he stunk up the joint. So nobody's getting it done. I don't want to be the gloomy Gus, but I don't know when they're going to pull out points here. Not with these 2 guys at quarterback.
No, you're right, Dave. What about you?
Yeah, that's the biggest concern I have as well, is can the Steelers, because that's been the problem the last 2 weeks, is that can they score enough points to win the game? On defense, they gave up 17 and 16. Seriously, 33 points total in 2 games, and came out 0-2 because they're just not getting enough points to win. Jeff mentioned the matchup with RG3 and what can they do with stopping that Ravens offense that maybe they can with a lot of the players not playing. They're not just going to have to stop them. They're going to have to turn them over in order to get the offense the shorter fields and everything.
Yeah, it really sucks. I thought that Mason Rudolph played well last week when he came in. I thought it was a situation where at least there was a spark of some kind. But let's be honest, if the Steelers' defense doesn't set them up, they're not scoring many points. And so because of that, I agree with Brian. It's really difficult to pinpoint one player. You can say Deontay Johnson, you can say James Washington, you could say one of the running backs. The reality of the situation is it's going to be tough sledding even against backups. That's just the reality of the situation. So let's get into our fantasy fix a little bit.
I was going to say,
go ahead, Dave.
I did have a quick stat geek today. If you're
do it now. It's a good time.
Yeah. I had one last week and I'm like, oh, I got to save this to week 17 because this is so much better. And then I was going to do it on the Stat Geek show. I'm like, no, I'm saving it for the preview. And then, dag nabbit, people used it today on Twitter. So you guys probably have seen this. And I'm like, and I've had this in my back pocket for over a week. But oh, well, I'm going to see just in case you didn't see it. When's the last time the Steelers lost in week 17?
I actually did see this, but I'll let Brian go.
Did you see it, Brian?
No, I actually did not. So I am going to say, they've beaten Cincinnati and they've beaten the Browns a few times. Gosh, man, I would probably think 12, 11, maybe 2007 when they lost to the Ravens.
That is correct. That is Mike Tomlin's first year as the head coach. They lost in week 17 in Baltimore to the Ravens because the Steelers were being quarterbacked by one Charlie Batch because they were resting their players for the playoffs. And even in the years since when the Steelers have rested players, they've still managed to win the game.
Was Jeff Blake the quarterback for Baltimore at that time, if I'm not mistaken?
That's a good question that I don't have the answer to because I didn't write that one down because I've had another number I was going to do instead too. So
go ahead.
Yeah, it's been that long, but because that one was kind of ruined a little bit, I had one other question just in your recent memory over the last 10 games for the Steelers, which has been since the last time they played Baltimore. That was 11 games ago, but since that game, what team has scored the most points on the Steelers in one game? What's the most points they've given up since they've played Baltimore?
Yeah, Brian, if you want to guess, go ahead.
Gosh, somebody scored in the 20. The Colts probably with 24.
That would be correct. That the team that has scored the most points on the Steelers over the last 10 games has been the Indianapolis Colts. Now, before that, the Ravens scored 26, but that took overtime to get to that 26. So if you think about it, the defense has been the only game they've given up more than 30 points all season was week 1. They gave up 33 to the Patriots in week 1. They gave up 28 to the Seahawks in week 2. Then they gave up, was it 24? Was it 24 or 26 to the 49ers the next
24.
week? Yeah.
It was 24-20 game, I think.
Yeah, I think you are correct. I knew it was a 4-point game. I'm just trying to remember which one was which. And that's been it. I mean, this defense has really, when you're talking about points per game, especially since the Minkah Fitzpatrick trade, has really been shutting down. So they've been holding teams under 20 points an awful lot. So it just goes to show with that record is that the defense has still pretty much been doing their job the entire time. It's just been the offense that can't get, when's the last time the offense has scored 20 points in the game? So
if you take away that 61 points that they scored, that they were scored against them the first 2 weeks of the season, your average is so much better. I'd like to calculate the average over the last 13 weeks because it's been fantastic.
That's a good stat geek there, Dave. Let's talk about some fantasy football stuff. Who will you start? Who will you bench? If you're doing this as a single game contest in your daily fantasy league, Dave, we'll start with you. Who are you starting? Who are you benching?
I'm going to start James Washington because I think once again, Juju Smith-Schuster will get some attention. So we'll go with James Washington. I really wanted to start a running back because I really think that it's the Steelers running game that's going to determine how well they do. I think if they can get that run going without Brandon Williams, it'll help set up the pass more. I just don't know which running back they're actually going to utilize. So I think that's dangerous. So although I think the running backs are going to be key, I'm going to bench all the Steelers running backs because we don't know what the divisional labor is going to be on Sunday.
That's a good point. Brian, what about you?
I like your James Washington pick. I'll go on the other side. I would go with Deontay Johnson because if anybody has a chance to, Jeff asked the question earlier, who's going to break out with 2 scores? If anyone has a chance, it's one of these 2 guys, 13 or 18, as far as I'm concerned. So I'd probably put my money on Deontay Washington if I'm not putting him on James Washington. Deontay Johnson if I'm not putting him on James Washington. I said Dave laughed. Even
I mean, if I
with the
could play
markup-
Deontay Washington and just get two of them for the price of one, I would be all over that one.
You would still hate Deontay Washington too, man. So, I almost made Jeff laugh there. Wow. So, anyways, I really think that's the guy to go ahead. I mean, it would be easy for me to say Chris Boswell. I mean, but we usually don't pick kickers here. He's probably going to dominate as far as the Steelers scoring. Justin Tucker on the other side of the ball too.
Those are all good. I'm going to say start the Steelers defense against RG3. Go for it. They'll probably have a good shot at getting some turnovers, some sacks with guys like Yonda not playing. And then on top of that, I'm going to say sit. There's so many on the Steelers offense that you could sit. Tight ends, running backs. I really like Deontay Johnson. Played him last week, but we'll see. So, okay, Dave, what's the spread right now?
The spread is 2 points in favor of the Steelers because of the Baltimore resting their players.
That's still?
Yes, it is still 2 points for the Steelers with an over-under of 37.5.
Okay, Brian, prediction time.
Baltimore 20, Pittsburgh 13. They're not scoring points, and I have not seen anything where they've been able to score points. And I hate to do it. I want to be right. I want to be wrong. I want to pick them. And I'm not, by the way, if I could address the live chat, I'm not stoned. In fact, I've never done a drug in my life, but I'm not stoned tonight. So thank you. But anyways, no, I would probably say that until they can score, when is the last time they scored 2 touchdowns? And I think it's been 9 weeks. Was that one of your stat geeks recently? They haven't scored 2 offensive touchdowns in a game in a long time.
It's been a long time.
So, you know what? I just don't think that they're going to go ahead and win this game.
Sidebar, does the turnover streak end?
No. Duck Hodges is a quarterback, and he's a gunslinger now, and he's throwing it up. The only thing is gunslingers usually get 50-50, and he's not anymore.
Okay. That's good. Dave, what's your prediction?
All right. My prediction is if I was going to have to put money on the game and give a score, I'm going to give a score of Baltimore 13, Pittsburgh 6. I just don't trust the offense to score any points. And I'm so tired of relying on the defense to do everything for them to even set them up for scores. Now, could Hodges come out and could the Steelers come out and just run and be successful? And then Hodges, everything opens up for him. And then all of a sudden everything's clicking. Absolutely. I would love to see that. And I think there is a chance that could happen, but I am not putting that chance over 50%. So therefore, that's why I would pick the Ravens. Now, here's the one other thing that I'm going to say on that note. I think the Steelers are not going to win this game, but if I was going to put money on it, I would put them to make the playoffs. That I think that the Titans will lose, the Steelers will lose, the Colts will win, and the Raiders will lose. That was how my picks actually fell out, which would actually put the Steelers in the playoffs.
What about you, Brian? Well, while you brought it up, I was going to bring it up next, but it's fine. Do you see them backdooring their way into the playoffs?
You know what? And I'm not sure if the information on the live chat is correct. Somebody said that Deshaun Watson might not play in this game because he's hurt. I haven't heard any injury news on that. If Deshaun Watson doesn't play, and I'm really not sure what reason that Bill O'Brien would have to go ahead and play this guy at this point, if he is slightly banged up, then I think it's going to be pretty hard for them to back in. I really don't. Like I said, I'm hoping they win. I just don't expect them to back their way in because I really expected it last year. I thought it was going to happen with the Browns and the Ravens, and it didn't. So I'm just not getting my hopes up on this one. My heart and my head are really saying that I don't think it could happen.
Okay, I'm going to go with my prediction of I think the Steelers get a defensive touchdown. Whether it's a Minkah Fitzpatrick pick 6, a TJ Watt sack fumble that's recovered in, I think the defense does the job. And I think the defense, they win 13-10. they're not going to score any offensive touchdowns. I think the streak continues. Dave, do you think the streak continues?
I think the streak continues, and I think if they score a defensive touchdown, they very well do win this game.
And on top of that, I think that, the Titans, I thought it was a genius move last week, sitting Derrick Henry, because they knew the game was technically meaningless. And so they're hoping to have him back in full strength. Hamstrings are a tough injury. I think that the Titans lose to the Houston Texans. I think the Texans don't want any part of the Titans being in the playoffs. They're going to play tough. They're at home. They're going to win the game. Maybe J.J. Watt gives a little bit motivational speech for his brother. And I think the Steelers get in. I am very optimistic. I always have been, but that's just what I think. So I said 13-10. Brian, your prediction was
20-13, I think.
Wow. Okay, so that's a lot of points, Dave.
Yeah, and mine was 13-6. But like I say, I actually think whether the Steelers win or lose, that we might see that the games are shaping up, that they're going to get in regardless as we're going down the wire. I would not be surprised to see the Broncos beat the Raiders at home, and I would not be surprised at all to see the Colts go on the road and beat the Jaguars. And then for the
Broncos are on fire.
Yeah, and then so it's really going to come down to that Titans-Texans game.
Yeah, and Bo says, he's a long-time listener. He said that Titans win, so nothing, it won't matter anyways. And that's a possibility. That's absolutely a possibility. I want to get your guys' take on something that I think Brian brought this up on the Steelers hangover on Monday. And that is there's a growing sentiment among Steeler fans that what's the use of even getting in? Like, why even get in? You're not going to go anywhere. And I know my dad, who is a big Steeler fan. Obviously, he's the reason why I like the Steelers. He even said, I hope they don't even get in. These guys are bums. They suck. And it's like, well, they're not playing well right now, but how would you ever say that you don't think they should get in? Like, absolutely, get in. At least it's experience. And when in the playoffs, we know this. You never know what's going to happen. Dave, what are your thoughts on that?
What's hilarious is how much your father can sometimes sound like my father then. Oh, they're bums. Oh, they're terrible, especially in game. But I'll be honest with you. If you don't want them, they don't even have the first round pick where they could benefit from not being in the playoffs.
Exactly.
That's the only other reason that I could see that it would really matter. You're like, well, in the second round and the third, that number of picks as the rounds go on isn't nearly as important as in the first round. It's another chance to see, as a fan, for you to see your team play, even if they don't play well. It's a chance for these players to get a game of playoff experience that could only help them and motivate them in 2020. Unless someone goes out there and gets injured so bad they can't even play next season, which is extremely rare to miss a season after from an injury from the end of this season. There is no reason to not want the Steelers in the playoffs, because even if you don't win, you at least got there and gained the experience.
Yeah, Brian, what are your thoughts?
Go up to Cam Hayward and say, you guys might as well not even bother playing trying to win this game, because you're going to lose in the first round of the playoffs.
That's such a good point.
He's going to be like, what? I mean, these guys have pride. And imagine, we talk about this 1-4 start all the time. We talk about just being 0-2 and losing your franchise future Hall of Fame quarterback with 14 games to go. The Miami Dolphins made that trade. They had a lot of offers on the table. Kansas City was one of them, as far as from what I believe. And, when you go ahead, I said go ahead. When you go ahead and look at that, Kansas City Chiefs could have given them even a better offer, but they expected this to be a top 5 pick. And there were Steeler fans at that point that threw in the towel and expect it to be a top 5 pick. Now, I know I'm saying that I don't think that they can go ahead and win this week, but they might. And I'm going to root like crazy for them to do so. And I'm going to believe that they can go ahead and achieve anything they want to. I go back to 1989. I go back to 2005 when the first round, the wild card game was against the Houston Oilers, who owned them like crazy. Jerry Glanville owned them. They went into the House of Pain, and they snuck out an amazing victory and went to Denver the next week and came very close to knocking them off. That was a magical year. And that's the thing. They didn't get past the second round of the playoffs, but that team, that 9-7 team making the playoffs, that was still a very special year. And there's a lot of us that talk about 1989. We talk about 2005 for an even greater reason, because they won the Super Bowl as a 6th seed. No one expected them to go ahead and beat the Cincinnati Bengals. It just wasn't supposed to happen. Carson Palmer owned them. Ocho Cinco, Hushmanzada. They all owned this team. But in that game, there was no own in that team. They went in and they took that game and they went all the way. The next week, weren't supposed to beat the Colts either. They were undefeated all the way up to week 15 that year. No way are they going to beat the 15-1 or 14-2 Colts. That's not going to happen. Seattle had a great record. So you keep watching this team. The hearts of every man in that room that is suited up for that game, the hearts of the coaching staff, they are ready to go into that game and give their best and see what they can do. It's jerks like me saying, I don't think Duck could do it because he hasn't done it the last 4 or 5 weeks. So I'm saying that I don't think he can, but sure, I hope he musters all the courage and the heart and everything he has that I believe he has, and I hope he makes it happen and proves this jerk wrong.
What about you, Dave?
I went first, so what about you, Jeff?
Experience trumps everything,
Yes.
you know, and especially in a sport that's a professional sport. It's not like high school where it's cyclical. You know, you have guys that come in and they graduate and they move on. It's same with college. In the NFL, you're going to retain a decent amount of your roster. And so getting the experience of the postseason and the magnitude of those games absolutely is important. And so I think that I would never, and I said this on The Hangover with Brian on Monday, I would never turn down a shot at the playoffs, ever. I don't care how bad the offense is playing. I don't care if Devlin Hodges looks like he's a high school quarterback playing in the NFL. If you can get in and see what you can do. Play with house money. I love that feeling. And I feel like this team could almost be there. So we'll see.
It's a very simple number there, Jeff. 0% of the teams that don't make the playoffs win the Super Bowl.
That's the stat geek of the year. I love it.
You have 0 chance to win it if you don't make the playoffs.
Jeff, I smell hashtag t-shirt.
Hey, I'm going to work on that in this offseason. I think I got a hookup.
0% of the teams that don't make the playoffs win the Super Bowl.
So, all right. Now, guys, is there anything else you want to add before we head on over to the after party? Brian, Dave, anyone?
This is our last Steelers preview of 2019, not necessarily of the 2019 season. It would be really great to be back here next week talking about a playoff game for Saturday or Sunday. After getting our hearts crushed last year, it's really difficult to think that it's going to work out differently this year. But this is a different year and a different team. And although I don't have the confidence right now with everything going well for the Steelers after the last 2 games that they could score more than 10 points, that doesn't mean that they're not going to come out there and things aren't going to fall their way and they go on to a victory. And then the other things fall their way and they make in the playoffs. I am cautiously optimistic. So let's just cheer really hard on Sunday.
We will be back no matter what. The Steelers preview, the podcast, we're not taking time off. We're not going to disappear and then show up again around the draft. This is our little group. We will do our shows every week. Brian, anything to add before we call it a show?
You know what? Like I said, I hope I'm wrong. I might not know what's going to be happening next year in January, but you know who does? Pittsburgh Steelers, because they have 20/20 vision.
Oh my gosh.
If you didn't see that comment.
Oh, Brian, I don't know what to say about that other than that's a good show. It's a good place to end it. We are going to head over to the after party if this is your first time dealing with that. Basically, if you want to hear some off-the-cuff stuff that has nothing to do, well, we'll start with the Steelers. Stay with the channel. You'll get a notification in about 5 minutes and enjoy it because we do. So as Lance always says, tune in, tell a friend, and subscribe. We'll see you next week, no matter what, for another episode of the Steelers Preview.